All right. Let's settle down. It's just crypto.
I'm Just, but my mama call me Justin. Welcome to a new DFK series. It's going to be a little different from me. This is going to be about dark summoning for combat. So I want to get this out as a digestible, followable four-part series for those players that have no DFK assets and are trying to participate in this new combat system, patrols. Thus, if you are a more enfranchised player, you might not find this that interesting, as it will be basic Dark Summoner functionality, not advanced Dark Summoner functionality, which you can find on Mythic Squad and a ton of other streams or podcasts over the years. But for someone with a zero DFK assets who has some USDC, they are bridged over to DFK chain via Synapse, or that they have turned into Jewel on MEXC and then transferred that Jewel onto DFK chain. Rewind that if you don't know what that means. Ask in Discord if you have any questions if you are brand new. But anyways, this is going to be more focused for those players as a step-by-step guide to getting started to making combat heroes. Those combat heroes can of course be used in patrols, hunts, and PvP at this moment in time. In fact, those same heroes can go through the progression, I believe is the idea, to start doing patrols, move over to hunts, and then end up in PvP. But a lot of these type of heroes that we summon are just going to be happy to be patrolling, and you can summon something better later if you decide you want to invest more in this game because you like it or because it's making you money. Maybe both. In Web 2, you spend some amount of capital, we'll say $50, buying the game, buying some sort of battle pass in some situations, buying a subscription in others, some sort of capital you're using for a Web 2 game just for the enjoyment, but you get nothing back. Whereas in Web 3, hopefully you also get some enjoyment, but if at any point you decide you want to pare down your collection or sell and move on to something else, everything here is tokenized. It's all on chain, so you can do that. This is DFK chain, aka Crystal Vale, where I'm going to be doing everything. So while you can go to the tavern on Metis, buy 3 heroes, go to the bazaar on Metis, buy potions, go to the equipment merchant on Metis, buy equipment, and patrol like that. And some number of people who don't watch this series, for example, will do that. But I think if you watch this series and do what I show you how to do on Crystal Vale, you'll get more bang for your buck. You'll give yourself the ability to get lucky and get a very nice hero to either keep and use in hunts or PvP, or sell to get more patrol heroes. And the truth of the matter is, if you're brand new and you go to the tavern either on Crystal Vale or in the Sunder's Isles, it's going to be very difficult for you to understand what is a good hero. Because a lot of these heroes, like the ones we're looking at here, are potatoes and have very little use other than to throw into the pit and try to make a better hero. By pit, I mean Dark Summoning Portal. But before we go there, let's take a quick minute to go through the different parts of this series I have planned. This is part 1, or part 0 you might call it, a primer, where I'm just going to explain kind of theoretically what you want to what you need to understand before putting any capital at risk in the tavern or in the pit or leveling up. Those would be the next 3 parts, which are kind of more proactive. And I'm going to do an example alongside of you that you can follow, where I buy a hero in part 2, search for its partner, both using third-party tools, and then in part 3, I'm going to go ahead and kill those 2 heroes and hope for a better hero and level it up for combat, ready to go for patrols whenever they drop. But right now we're on part 1. What you need for combat: you need 3 heroes, you need potions, you need equipment for those heroes. Most important of which is the heroes, which is what this series is in essence about. Towards the end, when we are done leveling up our test hero and ready to talk about bridging from Crystal Vale to the Sundered Isles and playing patrols and PvP, I will briefly go through the ways to get potions and equipment, but that is much more straightforward than using the dark summoning mechanic. Speaking of more straightforward, there are other options that we're not going to focus on to farm this stuff in terms of heroes, aka summoning dark summon parts, potions, aka questing to get alchemical components to those potions, and equipment you can either hunt with or you can farm gold and buy that specifically. But in an effort to not bog down the very new players, I'm going to skip through this and just show you how to buy everything. If you decide after you have a little more experience with DFK, it is very possible to utilize systems that are already in place, which will not be covered in this series, to do a lot of other things. But right now, we're just going to focus on buying them, and I'm going to keep a tally when I make my hero of how much crystal USD value basically I spend on that hero as a point of reference. There are also a bunch of tried and tested third-party apps that have been developed during the bear market. There's a lot of stuff available in terms of analytics for DFK heroes. 2 of these tools I'm going to use to specifically find and match heroes are going to be ADFK, which has a lot of paid and not paid features that can really help you out, as well as DFK Analytics, which is basically just what I use to browse the tavern. But both of those sites are in the castle, and we're going to deal with that in part 2 when we go shopping. But for right now, let's talk about the Dark Summon portal, because this is what you really need to understand here in part 1 in the Dark Summoning Primer. There are 2 portals in DFK. Let me start there actually. The regular portal is where you put in 2 heroes and they don't die. You might have figured that out. That's the Dark Summon part, is that the 2 heroes die. The regular portals, they just, I don't know, have sex, commune with the spirits of Gaia, and something else appears. I don't know. If you were to summon just these 2 heroes, which I did not put any thought into, and it's going to make a hero out of these 2 warriors, probably a warrior, but not necessarily. You can add a stone to it. There are lots of stones that augment your summons, and you spend some crystal in order to do that. The problem with this is that you are very likely to get a potato. The reason we do dark summoning, in essence, is that with the dark summoning portal, it grants you the ability to kind of control your summon. If you're going to be expending the summons, spending the capital on those heroes, expending the tears, expending the stone especially, you really want as much control as possible. Mostly what you're controlling with the Dark Summoning Pit is rarity. Rarity affects the total number of stats this hero is going to end up with at birth and every 5 levels after, so the total number of stats. Stones and crystals, which I briefly talked about, also affect stats. You want as much stats as possible, as you might think in an RPG. The problem with the regular summoning portal is, if you're going to use a stone, which is much of the expense for summoning good heroes, like these 2 rares have almost a 50% chance of giving you a potato. A common, 30% chance of uncommon. So you're actually downgrading the rarity if you're using the regular portal. Whereas these same 2 heroes in the Dark Summoning Pit, where they will both die, give you a minimum of a rare for hero rarity. So you're never going to downgrade your heroes. And when that is true, that is when you can opt to use a bigger stone and give yourself a huge stat boost, or less of a stat boost, or decide, and then you use your tears as well to get more stats, more stats. This is how you generate a powerful hero in DFK. But you want to do it when you are setting the floor for the rarity. That's why we use dark summons instead of regular summons, because it would really suck to use a stone that costs a lot of money just to end up with a common, whereas when you do it like this, these guys on their own aren't that valuable, but the rare that they give you that is augmented with tears, stones, you can even convert the remaining summons into a higher rarity bonus, so we just went up more so to get almost a 10% chance of getting a mythic or legendary. These are going to give you a ton more stats, and this is just how you pile on all the stats at once. That is the basic premise of the Dark Summoning Pit. If you're very new, it may seem like a really bad deal to kill 2 heroes and get 1, but the vast majority of heroes that exist in DFK do not have a ton of value right now in their current form. Their value is made by using them in the Dark Summon Pit, stacking on upon stats, and then leveling it up fresh. If you're going to be using a stone, if you're going to be committing the capital into making a good hero, you want to do it here as opposed to the regular portal. It's not all about stats, it's also about traits, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Can also be noted that neither of these portals exist in the Sundered Isles on meta, so you actually have to do all of your dark summoning rather, on Crystal Vale. You can do regular summoning in Crystal Vale or Sarandale, which we're not going to talk about hardly at all in this video. But that's okay. That is the primer. We want to utilize and understand these dark summoning portal mechanics, optimize our resources for making a good combat hero as opposed to just another regular hero which has very little value. In addition to the stats that I kind of touched upon about piling on stats upon stats, we're also going to try for certain traits that are very good in combat. The Dark Summoner doesn't necessarily help with this. In fact, it does not. They're going to have the same mutation chance on either the regular or Dark Summoned, but we're going to look at these traits in depth using these third-party tools in the next section, so we have the best chance possible to end up with a great hero at the end. Probably won't. You're usually going to end up with the floor, so this is usually going to be a rare warrior. If we get lucky, it'll have 3 of these green traits. It might upgrade from a rare to a legendary or a rare to a mythic, and it will maintain the levels of the hero. So if we did these 2, I would have a level 15 warrior available and ready to go. So you don't lose the levels when you Dark Summon, whereas if they were in the regular portal, we would end up with a level 1, which may or may not be a common potato. So that's the primer. That concludes part 1. Next time we are going to head to the tavern in Crystal Vale and talk a lot about traits, use our third-party tools, pick up a starting hero, and then match it. Try to do so as efficiently as possible, spending as little crystal as possible for as good of a pair as possible. Alright, we'll see you in part 2.